Hi, welcome to Bookish Brits. I'm Rex, and today I'm going to be talking about my adventures through the Wheel of Time. Now, the Wheel of Time is written by Robert Jordan and was finished by Brandon Sanderson, and it has 14 books, so it is no small feat. Now, I, for many years, did not want to read it because it was unfinished, and I hate reading an unfinished series, as I realised when I got to book 2 of Kingkiller Chronicle and realised book 3 hadn't been written, and had the exact same thing again when I started the Stormlight Archive. I'll do a video on that later, and realised that that hadn't been finished. And I can name loads of series, including Game of Thrones, where I was just like, why did I start this when it hasn't been finished? So the good news is all 14 books are available now, but it still took me a while to get over to reading it, because I'd heard very mixed things. I mean, these books are massive, they've been around for a long time, and they have a very dedicated fan base. And lots of people being like, nah, don't bother, I read one of the books and got bored. So, conflicting things, but eventually I thought, you know what, this is a fantasy stalwart, I'm going to do it. So I'm at book 6, I'm hoping to do another video at the end of the year when I get to book 14, fingers crossed. And this is where I'm at so far. So, for those of you who accused it of being very derivative and got bored, I completely understand. Book 1, it does feel quite derivative of other fantasy works, in particular Tolkien and maybe Magician and a few other bits. But by book 2, it really hits its stride. So the main plot, you've heard this one before, we have the rise of the person who will destroy the Dark One, and the Dark One is entombed, or there's a big history about how the Dark One tried to destroy everyone before, and you've probably heard this on multiple fantasy books. So you can see how there's definitely that Tolkien influence. But what he does, which is very clever, is he sets up this narrative, and then he adds things, and he changes things, and he brings in lots of extra elements. So in book 3, we encounter a whole new set of antagonists that almost have nothing to do with this sort of good versus evil epic battle, people realising who they are and what part they're meant to play in the wider final battle, so to speak. So from that perspective, that addition in book 3 caught me off guard, because until then I'd been pretty certain as to where it was going to go. Not so certain anymore in book 6. And the nice thing is there isn't one main character or 2 or 3, there's about 6 main characters and others who are sort of tangential and come in and out, but still very interesting on their own. And as the books develop, the shift changes from character to character, and it gets very big, much in the way that George R.R. Martin's books are. And I do think he was probably influenced by the level of politics that comes in to the narrative that Jordan puts together. We've got warring countries and religious factions and how those interact with each other. So we've got this religious group called the Children of the Light, who seem righteous but are actually quite corrupt. And then you've got different queens and kings of different nations. Some are stronger than others, some rely on trade, some are very wealthy, and the games and the intrigues between within the countries and between each other, and what that influence has on the world. So when this person who is going to save everyone sort of reappears and knows who they are, you then have the dichotomy between people who are very happy about this and then jump on the bandwagon and almost create a new religion around it, and people who are very grumpy about this because essentially it's going to ruin their way of life, and they don't believe that this is actually happening, and they think that's for political gain or favour. So that whole interchange and interplay is very interesting, and it keeps the plot driving forward. And you never really know, with the 6 characters, they're not always separated and then they come together. They kind of intertwine. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart, sometimes a couple of them are together. Their plots all go off in different directions. You can see how they're working with one another to maybe this ultimate end, but it's got a lot of pace. It's very interesting. I'm reading about 1 a month at the moment, and they're quite chunky while reading other things. A good thing I've got them on a digital copy, because I think carting around that many books might be a bit difficult. So what I will say is, if you haven't read them and you want to give them a go, read at least up to book 3 before you decide if you're going to carry on. I think by that point I was definitely invested, and immediately, with the end of each one, got the next one and was quite happy to dive straight in. I know I've been told that book 7 is kind of a slow patch, so I've got that to look forward to and see if I get through it. But if you've only read 1 and stopped, I get it, but it is worth carrying on. I've certainly enjoyed it so far. I'm not even thinking twice about getting to 14 unless something really awful happens in the next couple of books. But it's been fun, and it's almost nice to go back to a world with a really interesting magic system and quite a good mix of different characters and different approaches that they all have. And the one thing that does get me, though, is sometimes the characters are quite amusingly petty with one another, and you're like, there's much bigger things going on. Why are you all so annoyed with each other? But then it's incredibly human too, and I think a lot of fantasy books, when you're reading the characters, they're so busy being noble with one another and having these high morals that they never are really particularly petty unless it's with an antagonist, as opposed to how friends are with each other. They get on each other's nerves and they wind each other up, and they still love them, but they just have more of a human relationship. And that's something that's actually quite nice in Jordan's books so far. So there's that to enjoy, and that for me is a little bit different to some of the sort of traditional fantasy stalwarts that are out there. So that's where I am right now, book 6. I hopefully haven't given you too many spoilers because it is worth reading and I don't want to go down that path. And maybe I'll let you know how I get on when I finally finish the series. So take care.